There you go. Perfect.
That is weird. It's not like there's
What's up, Tom?
I got everybody muted upon entry, so they can't respond until they unmute themselves.
Can you guys hear me? Somebody let us know. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Danny. You're fine.
All right,
Just
buddy.
can't see you.
You can't see me?
No, stand up.
Oh. All right.
More people coming in now.
Last minute. Dan, how are you, Dan?
I'm well, Dan.
Thank you, JT, Jim. Yeah, I don't know who Aqua is. Aqua.
Oh, I need to text Melissa and Michelle.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Tommy boy,
Yeah,
how you doing?
I'm
Everybody,
doing great.
grab a seat. All right. We're swindling down here. And we didn't even finish the first step yet. Okay, hopefully next week we'll do step one. We'll do an exercise to do step one. Before we begin, I just wanted, in case you haven't heard, Doug that usually sits over here, he's had a heart attack and he's in the hospital, he's in a coma, so keep him in your prayers. Good guy, and Carol. The last I heard, they tried to take him off and they put him back on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Does anybody got any questions on? We've covered a lot of stuff. We're kind of getting close to finishing off. We finish off more about alcoholism, then we'll do the first step exercise. But anybody got any questions? I mean, you got a lot of information. What's that?
I'm just fixing it.
Oh, okay.
I got you.
Anybody got any questions at all? Anybody online? Got any questions? Need to talk about before we move on? No? Okay. All right, let's go to page 35. You know, actually, I just wanted to make a note for you that, and just chapter 3, there's more about alcoholism. I think I said to you when we started was that it's about the insanity of alcoholism, right? And there's many examples in this chapter about that. So just to recap up to where we, back on page 30, the first paragraph, there's an example there of the insanity. The the third paragraph is an example. That's when we talked about being a pickle. On page 31, the first paragraph, despite all we can say on, that's an example. The bottom of the page 31 is that test, right? That's an example. So we want to look at all the examples of the insanity of alcoholism. Page 33 in the bottom of the page is another example there. And then on page 34, the first paragraph is another example there. All right, so we're on page 35. And this is a great example of the insanity of alcoholism. Yeah. So we're going to start off on the second paragraph. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He'd been a commendable World War II record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came in contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. There's a lot of examples of that kind of thing in AA. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. I think I said to you this, but when you read the big book, there's two reasons why people go back out. Number one, they've never taken the first step 100%. And number two, they failed to enlarge their spiritual life. So old Jim failed to enlarge his spiritual life. He says that he agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had a deep affection. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly what happened. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a few minutes, and those of you that have been through this, do not give out the answer. I'll say that again. For those of you that have been through this, do not give out the answer, okay? This paragraph here, where we asked him to tell his story, I want you guys to read this and see if you find any warning signs that Jim should have had. And just make a little note of how, you know, if you saw more than one, just make a note, okay? And I'm going to wait a minute and let you guys read that. So just that first paragraph there.
The one that starts with "we told him."
No, top of page 36. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly what had happened. This is his story. So from there to the end of that paragraph, read that through and see if you find any warning signs that Jim should have had. Now, also keep in mind that this is kind of new in Alcoholics Anonymous history. Jim didn't have the 80 years or whatever it is of AA experience, didn't have meetings and didn't have all of the stuff that you have. Okay, but let's just see if you could find a couple of warning signs that Jim should have had. I'll give you a minute to go through that paragraph. And then I'm going to ask those of you that have never done this exercise with me to tell me if you found any. When you read through it, and raise your hand if you want to tell me if you found any warning signs. How many did you find? One? Okay. Anybody else find more than one?
A lot, actually.
Okay.
It's one of my favorites.
All right. If you've been through this with somebody before, don't say it now. 4? You found 4? Okay. Amy, we're on top of page 36.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? How many? You found 3? Okay. Anybody else? So again, Jim didn't have all the experience and all the stuff that you have at your disposal. It depends how you look at it, but there's at least 13 in this paragraph, warning signs. Let's go through them, and when you mark your book as we go through them, okay? So this is his story. He says, I came to work on Tuesday morning. Now, some people want to say, what happened Monday, right? He was all messed up on Monday. We don't know that to be true. So we're not going to count that one, okay? Some people want to count that as a warning sign. He came in Tuesday because he was all fucked up Monday. No. He says, I remember I felt irritated. Right there, right?
Yep.
That I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Who said that? Okay, so in that sentence, there's two warning signs, right? He felt irritated, and now he's justifying his feelings. You see that? So I should feel irritated because I used to own this place, right? So this is his mind frame. So there's two warning signs there. I had a few words with the boss. Mhm. I don't know where you come from. Where I come from, you don't have words with the boss. But nothing serious. Another warning sign. Totally discounting and minimizing the experience he just had. Then I decided to drive into the country. Right? He's mad. He's resentful. He's angry. And what's he doing? He's going out by himself. He's in the worst company he could possibly be in. I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. So here he is again, justifying his bad behavior. I could go take a ride by myself because I'm going to see somebody about it, maybe to buy a car. On the way, I felt hungry. You know, there's that old AA saying, don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, halt. Okay. So he felt hungry. So I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. Big red flags there, right? He just had an argument with his boss. He's pissed off. He's resentful. Now he's driving by himself. Now he's going to stop where they have a bar. Not a good move. I had no intention of drinking. Big flag there because that's total denial. I just thought I would get a sandwich. Again, justification for bad action. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place. So there he is again, justifying, which was familiar for, had been going to it for years. How about changing people, places, and things? Okay. So he's had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. Bad move, right? What's that old saying? If you keep going to barbershop, eventually you're going to get a haircut. So if you keep going to a bar, eventually you're going to take a drink. Years ago, I don't know if they still have, they used to have the sober bar over there on Penn. And I would sponsor guys I had sponsored a couple of guys who were hanging out there every night. I told them, don't be going there like that. How long can you go to a place that has a bar, a pool table, and music and a dance floor and not want a damn drink? You know, you're tempting the devil. If you're going there for a reason, it's okay. So he says, I sat down at the table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. That's the only sentence in this paragraph that doesn't have a warning sign. Still no thought of drinking. There we are again, denial. And the next sentence is another one that has no. I ordered a sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I would put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. And at this point, I think we mentioned this last week or so. At this point, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob could have came in and sat down with him. It doesn't matter. He was taking a drink. He was already lost, already gone. So if you want to count up what we just said, it's about 13 warning signs in that one little paragraph. So these are things that we want to be aware of. We want to help others to be aware of when we're working with them. That people way back in those days really weren't aware of that, you know, what justifying and denying and, you know, minimizing and, you know, isolating and things like that. So I love this whole paragraph, by the way, most of it is in italic, right? So he ordered a whiskey and put it in a glass of milk. Couldn't hurt him because he had a full stomach, right? He says, I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart. No shit. But felt reassured as I was taking it on a full stomach. I love this next one, right? The experiment went so well. I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. Oh, hell yeah. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. We were talking last week and somebody said, you know, I forgot what it was as soon as this was over. I always get questions after this. I wish I could get them here. But I said, it's alcoholism. It's not alcoholism. You don't not have it just because you're sober. In the big book, at the very beginning, before it even starts in the forwards, there's a little paragraph under the title, I think, and it says something about we're hundreds of men who have recovered from alcoholism. So it says this is recovered from alcoholism. Yeah, you've recovered from the alcoholism, but you still have alcoholism, but you've recovered from all the symptoms of alcoholism. It's like, what is that?
Like you're in remission.
Yeah, like you're in remission, or I could, if I break my arm and then my arm heals, right? I've recovered from the broken arm, but my arm is, I broke my arm when I was a kid, and I broke my wrist, and look at that. I did that when I was 12 years old. It's never been the same. It's healed, but I don't nearly have the strength in this wrist that I do in this one, and haven't in all those years. But it's healed. I've recovered from my broken wrist, but my wrist is not the same. So we recover from alcoholism. I think what he's saying by that is we've got rid of all of the ramifications and all the symptoms of alcoholism, but we still have it. Okay. So bottom of the page says, thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. He was here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of the intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. This is all in italic, right? Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. So now, I told you that by the time we're done with the first step, you will know the truth about yourself. And once you know the truth about yourself, you'll never be able to drink or use on that truth, right? So Jim knew the truth about himself. He had made a little bit of recovery. But when he went in there, he was totally blocked off from the truth. He had all those, little things going on with him that helped block him off from the truth. He says, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Pure insanity. All right. So now there's another example, right? He talks about, go down to the bottom of the page now in 37. It says, our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with the passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you may label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. The first time I read this, I don't know, I think I shared this with you. I thought, what a fucking idiot this guy is. How could you be so stupid? I could not relate to this guy at all. I mean, look at how silly it is, what he's doing, right? So we go through all this stuff. Luck then deserts him and he's slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he's hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. I almost stopped reading the book at this point. This is that stupid, right? On through the years, his conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Nuts. More than crazy. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? And this is the part that hit me like a bolt of lightning, right? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. I said, wait a minute, what did they say? I had to read that again. If I changed alcoholism for jaywalking, it's the same shit, all right? However intelligent he may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Remember we talked about Vladimir going up to the wood cabin and putting his hand on the hot, right? And we said he's an able, intelligent, friendly guy, but when it comes to wood burning stones, he ain't got a damn bit of sense, right? Well, the truth of the matter is, most of us are able, intelligent, friendly kind of people. When it comes to alcohol, we ain't got a damn bit of sense. All right. So let's go over to page 39, and there's another example now. The top of the page, first paragraph says, that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And that's all in italic, right? And this is probably one of the most strongest sentences in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous as far as trying to put a point across to you. He says, this is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, and has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. So they want to emphasize and re-emphasize and smash in upon you that self-knowledge is not going to do it. I knew I was alcoholic 5 years before I got sober. I knew, I don't know about alcoholic, but I knew I got a problem. I need to stop. And I was always the kind of person that thought I could stop anytime I want to. I just don't want to until I wanted to. And then I went, oops. I think I made a mistake. So now let's talk about Fred now. Fred is the partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good and he has a fine home, is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. He is so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it was Fred. To all appearances, he's a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in the hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. I don't know. I haven't met anybody. I'm sober over 30 years now. I haven't met anybody that went to treatment or the hospital because they had a bad case of jitters. I just, maybe it's true. I haven't met anybody. So he had a bad case of jitters. In other words, he couldn't stop shaking. He needed a drink. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. There you go. That's a good reason. That's a good reason to go to the hospital. I rest my nerves. I don't know about then, but today insurance ain't going for that shit. You want to rest your nerves, go home and lay down. The doctor indicated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so, in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept the spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. Now, we just learned that self-knowledge ain't gonna fix it. We heard no more, Fred. And then skip down a paragraph and it says, let him tell you about it. He says, I was much impressed with you fellas said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men fail. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time, all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I'd been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to the government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about it. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased, and I knew my partners would be too. In the end, it was a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Very poetic, isn't it? Perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. Now, remember I said you can't drink and use on the truth once you understand the truth about yourself. You have to be blocked off from that. And he was blocked off from the truth. He says, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. And needless to say, we don't have to read the rest, thank you. Needless to say, he goes on a bend of things. And he can't remember much. He took the wrong plane home and all that stuff. He says, at the bottom of the page, he says, I now remember what my alcoholic friends had told me they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that happened and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. So, Fred had a great day. Business was great. There wasn't a cloud on the horizon, yet he got loaded. And so what this chapter is doing is showing us different examples of people. Is showing us the guy that Jim that's, arguing with his boss and just all mad at the world, and it's showing us the guy who runs in front of fire trucks and that kind of stuff, just somebody does crazy things. And then it's showing us a guy that got everything going for him and no problems. And the end result on all of them is the same. And the end result of drinking and using is the same for all of us. We wind up alone and hurting. That's where alcohol and drugs takes us to. We wind up alone and hurting. It doesn't matter who you are and where you're from and what you did or didn't do. The end result of drinking and using, we wind up alone and hurting. So down here on page 42.
Okay, so.
Yes.
you're talking about the strange mental blanks, the strange mental blank spot.
Can you say that 3 times fast?
No. So that's,
What's,
I guess to me, that's that's the scary thing, because if alcohol is panic battling powerful, correct? And we're prone to those strange mental blank spots. What is the solution?
oh, we're going into the solution. AA and the 12 steps is the solution, and God.
And
Yeah.
and say so. Conscious contact with God, right?
Well, the idea is so, right? At the end of the first step, you will know the truth about yourself. And I've said numerous times, you cannot drink or use on the truth ever. So once you know the truth about yourself, once you've done a thorough, good first step, you can't drink or use anymore. The only way you're able to drink or use after you know the truth about yourself is that you become blocked off from the truth. And how do you become blocked off from the truth? You block yourself off from the people, your tribe members, right? You block yourself off from the literature. You block yourself off from God. You stop going to meetings. You stop talking to a sponsor. You stop carrying the message. You stop working with others. You stop reading the literature. You stop hitting your knees. And those things, you know, because when we get sober, we get busy. And when we get busy, we start forgetting why we got sober and why we got busy to begin with, right? The reason we got busy is because we got sober. Because we sure weren't busy before sober. We were just busy doing nothing then. You know, we were the hamster on the wheel spinning fast, going nowhere. But today we have a life and a purpose, and life is good for us. And so we get busy. And so if we're not connected, we're not plugged in, if we're not doing the things we're supposed to do, we forget why we're doing these things that got us so busy anyway, because we're sober. Because we got 12 steps in our life, because we got God in our life, because we got a sponsor, because we're sponsoring people, because we're carrying the message, because we're doing these things. That takes us to a position where life gets busy. And the amazing thing has been for me, in my experiences, before I got sober, I didn't have time for anything or anyone. And I wasn't doing shit. It's not like I had a job or anything. I wasn't doing nothing. I had no time for nothing and no one. Today I'm sober. I got time for anything or anyone. I've always got the time today. And I'm doing more things than I've ever done before in my life. But I still have time to do things. How does that work? I don't know. But I know that's my truth. You know, and everybody that I work with and seeing that's their truth too. You know, it doesn't matter where you're from or where you're going. There's AA all over the world. You know, so you stay plugged in, you stay hooked up, and you don't block yourself off from the truth. And if you don't block yourself off from the truth, you won't drink or use.
So another way of looking at that strange mental blank spot would be cut off from the palate, right? I'm in the water,
Disconnected.
disconnected.
Yes. There's something in the 12 and 12. I think it's in step 10. It talks about the, what's that spiritual axiom? Is that every time that we're disturbed, there's something wrong with us? You've read that before? It's in step 10 to 12 and 12, right? When I read that years and years ago, I went, oh, that's bullshit. These people, if they didn't do what they did or acted the way they acted, I wouldn't. And then somebody told me to look up the word disturbed. And I got a dictionary out. We didn't have Wikipedia back then. I got a dictionary out and I looked up the word disturbed. And one of the definitions of the word disturbed is cut off from spirituality. So if I'm disturbed, I'm cut off from my spirituality. There's something the matter with me. It's not about whose fault it was or who did what. But when I allow myself to be disconnected, unplugged, not with you people, not with the book, not with God, and when I allow myself to be those things in that way, I'm disconnected. I'm unplugged. I'm open to get wounded.
This, I'm guessing, is still even 100%. You'll be okay. This is like we're getting as many tools as we can to stay away from that first drink. This isn't, you're doing this, and it's fail-proof. Or are you saying you haven't seen somebody that's spiritually well, doing everything they're supposed to be doing, working with others, working with their sponsors, never fail?
Well, that's a great question. What's your name?
Stefan?
It's a great question. And I want to answer to you what I believe to be the true answer to that. No, I've never seen that happen. Now, have I seen people that were busy in the rooms and had long-term sobriety go out and get loaded? Yes. But I don't know if you were here, one of the first weeks, I gave you the definition, the difference between two words. And the two words were action and activity. And I said that action is a continuous purposeful movement always toward a goal, and activity is not. Activity is the hamster on the wheel spinning around thinking he's going somewhere, he ain't going nowhere. If you guys remember that. So action, if you're taking action, if you have a goal, like we ask people to define what sobriety is to them, and that's their goal. And now if anything I'm doing, I can always stop at any time and ask myself, is this a continuous purposeful movement toward my goal? If it's not, then I'm just stuck in activity. And there's plenty of people in the rooms that have long-term sobriety that are engaged in activity. A lot of them frantic activity. And they think, or you look at them and you would think this person's got a great program. This person sober a long time, but they aren't doing any step work on themselves. I got everybody else's inventory figured out, but they're not working on self. So those people, yes, but what you said and the answer to that, if it were true, yes, you're good then, you know. I believe that, you know, I believe that the people, and the statistic in the big book is that 75% of people that come in and really apply themselves is get sober, stay sober. 50% at once, 25% after some relapses. But so it's all about, you know, listen, if you can't bullshit me, you ain't no good drunk. You ain't no good drug addict, right? So if I'm sponsoring you and you're bullshitting me, who you hurting? I'm sleeping good at night. When I go to sleep at night, I ain't got no problems. I lay my head down and I'm snoring in a minute. But you're the one that's lying. You're the one that's got to check yourself. I'm not here to make you check yourself. I just hold up a mirror and say, hey, you know, in other words, I sponsor people. I say, how you doing? They say, great. Okay, man, nothing else to talk about. There's nothing for us to talk about. You just tell me great. If I say, how you doing? You say, oh shit, man, I got this. Oh, let's sit down and talk about it. You see, so being honest with yourself and honest with the people in the rooms is a big difference between activity and action. Does that make sense? Okay. Good question. All right, back on page 42. So we're down at the second paragraph that says, then they outlined the spiritual answer and the program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Now, if you remember the first week, we did the circle and the triangle, and we broke down the three parts of the program and the recovery part of the program. I told you it was broken into three parts. The recovery part of the program is what is the problem? And we found that already in here when we went through it just a week or so ago. And the other two parts is what is the solution? What is the program of action? Well, here it is. They outlined the spiritual answer and the program of action. That's your second and third part of recovery. So the three parts of recovery is what is the problem? What is the solution? What is the program of action? And I got news for you. I've learned to take those three things and apply them to every situation if I want to. I don't apply them to everyone, but if I really want a good solution, I'll apply it to that. And I'll look at what really is the problem. And I don't know what the real problem is, even though a lot of times I think I know for sure what the problem is. And I'm never more wrong than when I'm positive I'm right. So if I do a first step and I find out in the exercise we're going to do next week to do the first step, if I do that on the situation, then I find out what the problem really is. And now I know what the solution is. And now I got a program of action to take me there. And I can solve any problem. You know, there's 400 and something 12-step programs. And they're all helpful to people. I personally don't need to go to any of them except here. You know, I go to CA and AA. But I don't need to go to any other program because the solution is right here in this book to solve any problem I have. And the 12th step even tells me that. All right, so we're back on page 42. Though I'd been only a nominal church person, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. Yeah. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. This was not easy, but the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. So here he made a decision, and he felt like he got progress from that. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. We just talked about that. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying than, and I hope more useful than the life I had lived before. So I think we talked about it a week or two ago in here that, you know, if you're 10 years sober, 5 years sober, 3 years sober, 20 years sober, and you're going to go through the steps again, there is no reason in the world that you should be working the steps on alcohol and drugs. Why? But I bet you got some problems at home or at work or in the community or somewhere that you could apply these 12 steps to and change your life. I bet you. But your problem is not alcohol and drugs anymore. I tell you about the guy in Florida that I sponsored. He was 45 or 47 years sober. And when he asked me to sponsor him, I said, why do you want me to sponsor you? This guy never been through the work. What? Never been through the work. This guy, he hasn't had a drink in 45 or 47. Now it's like 50 years or more. But man, he was getting divorced. His business was going down the tubes, and you know, everything was not good. So, you know, he was just a mess. It was like he was a drunk. He was a dry drunk. So I call that stark raving sober. So, he was stark raving sober. And that's not what we want. If I'm going to be miserable like that, give me back my dope. Give me back my drink. Right? If I'm going to be miserable like that, give me something to relieve myself. It's about being happy, joyous, and free. Doesn't mean in life you don't have any problems, but you deal with them. They're not. There's two rules. The first rule is there's no big deals, and the second rule is there's no big deals. Oh no, the first one is don't sweat the small stuff, and the second one is there's no big deals. That's it. I knew that wasn't right what I said. It didn't make sense. All right. So now on page 43, we got another example, and that's the doctor who, in his opinion, it says, as to two of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless apart from divine help. Had you offered yourselves as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there's virtually no other solution. So what's the solution? It's a spiritual solution. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. Okay, so now let's go back to page 30. Actually, maybe we're going to get this done this week. And next week, maybe we can start on step 2. All right, page 30, second paragraph. We learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. That's what it says, right? So, a few weeks back, I asked you, what's the first step in recovery? And a couple of you said, we admitted we're powerless. No, that's the first of the 12 steps. The first step in recovery is right here. We learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. It says so right there in the book. This is the first step in recovery. So there's a step before the step. And the reason that there's a step before the step, if you just go to page 59, and only thing you can do, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, dash that our lives have become unmanageable. The only thing you can do there is agree with that statement. Agreeing with that statement is not taking the first step. Because like I told you, I agreed with that statement 5 years before I got sober. So, but if I learn to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, and then when I get to page 59 and I admit that I'm powerless, that my life is unmanageable, it's on a different level. Because now I understand what I'm admitting it to, and now I understand what we're talking about. It's not just, yeah, I'm powerless over alcohol. Yeah, my life's unmanageable. Look, any newcomer can tell you that. Guy can be in the room 10 minutes. You powerless over alcohol? Yeah. Your life unmanageable? Oh, yeah. Oh, damn, that guy got the first step. No, he don't. No, he don't. Well, he just admitted he was powerless and that his life was unmanageable. It doesn't matter. He has no clue what he's talking about. There's no clue what he's admitting to. So here, back on page 30, it's telling me in the second paragraph, we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. So how do I do that? All right. So I'm going to give you an exercise that is not out of the book. Okay. So don't say, "Oh, where's it in the book?" It's not in the book. But a long time ago, I learned this exercise, and I have shared this with thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people all over the world, doing conventions, doing workshops at conventions all over the world. And I've shared this, and I've had people come back to me. I was in Spain one time and shared this, and then 6 years later, I was in London, and a guy said, "Hey, when you shared this in Spain, man, that should help me." So the conclusion of this little process that I'm going to teach you, the only conclusion you can have is learning that you're to fully concede to your innermost self. So we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self. So first thing question would be then, what is your innermost self? What might be your innermost self? Anybody want to take a crack at that? What might be your innermost self?
Head full of AA and a belly full of booze.
That's not deep enough for your innermost self. How about your soul, your spirit, your soul? Okay, their innermost self. The book tells us later on that God is a part of each and every one of us, right? That deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, right? And that the book tells us that God is here just as much as a friend is. So that my soul, my spirit, I tend to think that would be my innermost self. Okay, how do I get in touch with that? Here's the interesting part. So let's think about it. Let's do the process of elimination. Can I use my mind? So let's say, let me back up a second. Can we agree, for lack of time, can we agree that what they're talking about here is to get gut level honest with yourself? Does that make sense? The innermost self, right? Fully concede to my innermost, getting gut level honest with myself. Is that fair enough? Okay, so we can skip some things and let's get to the part where, can I use my mind to do that? Can I think my way to that, getting gut level honest? No, why not? We deceive ourselves. That's right. And the book says that the main problem centers in my mind rather than my body. I have a disease of mind and body, right? So I lie to myself. I deceive myself. I can't get gut level honest, not at the level I have to be with my mind. So how about my mouth? Can I talk it out with somebody else and get gut level honest? Huh? Why not? You lie? So what comes out of your mouth is controlled by your brain. Right? Okay. So yeah, lie to myself, deceive myself again. even through words. Okay. How about my heart? Can I get gut level honest with my heart? What do you think? You're smiling back there. What do you think? You don't know? All right.
I think my heart lies to me, so maybe not.
I think my heart lies too. Just think what my mind wants to agree with my mind. I think.
Well, you know, something happened hundreds of years ago. And I think I read about it a long time ago. There's one already started. There you go. Yeah. I think it was a marketing gimmick, but somebody came up with this little baby with a halo and a bow and arrow. Cupid. And they used this thing, and I don't know, over the years, it's turned out that this little baby with a diaper and a halo and a bow and arrow is the representative of love, right? This is the symbol of love, right? So Cupid shoots his arrow, boom, you're gonna be in love, right? And again, I think it was a good marketing ploy, but the truth of the matter is that your heart is just an organ in your body. It pumps blood through your system. You know, we like to attribute all these lovely things to the heart, but really, I mean, I could say to you, I love you with both of my kidneys, honey. You know, it's really not much difference. There's really not much difference because it's an organ we're talking about. So I can't use my mind, and I can't use my mouth, and I can't use my heart to learn how to fully conceive. But you know what I can use? My hand. I could take a pen and put it in my hand, and I could commit to a piece of paper everything that I do. And this is your exercise, and I want you to have this done for next week. Whatever you're working the steps on, if it's alcohol and drugs, then you do it with alcohol and drugs. And if it'll help you can draw a line down the middle piece of the paper, and on the left side, you can put on the top of the left side, you can put in the pursuit of, and on the right side, you can put under the influence of. Once you get to do this on a regular basis, you don't need to separate the paper. You could just do a list. Okay. I still use this today to find out what my problem is. Okay.
What's the second?
It's in the pursuit of and under the influence of. And now, but here's the thing, and you got to hear me on this, okay? You want to write down on paper only things that you're positive that you wouldn't do if you were in sound mind. No matter how silly it sounds, if you're sure, like for instance, when it came to cocaine, right? And I had to make my list there. I said, I'm positive. There's no doubt in my mind. I can fully concede to my inner self that if I did cocaine, I'm gonna be peeping out the window. That's 30-something years now, and I haven't peeped out the window in all these years. I just checked on the rain a couple of times, you know, but that was it. So, and I'm positive that when I drink, there's no doubt in my mind. I'm positive. I can fully concede to my own self that when I drink, I'm gonna get in a fight. I was like either Don Corleone or Don Juan, you know, or sometimes both, right? Sometimes I'd fucking fight, you know. But you know, I'd either fight or you know, think I'm Don Juan and try to make love to somebody, right? So that without a doubt. And like for marijuana, if I smoke the joint, there's no doubt in my mind. I can fully concede to my inner self. I'm 100% sure. If I smoke the joint, I'm gonna eat a meal. It doesn't matter if I just ate a meal 10 minutes ago. I smoke a joint, I'm gonna eat another meal, right? So some of those things are silly, but it doesn't matter. If you're sure, because in sound mind, I don't eat back-to-back meals. In sound mind, I don't start fights with people. I don't try to make love to every woman I see, right? I don't peep out the windows, right? So you have to write this list. It has to be as extensive as you can make it be. And if you're working the steps on, somebody tell me what they're working the steps on other than alcohol and drugs.
My teenager.
You're a teenager.
That's a good one.
Okay, so you have under the influence of and in the pursuit of. So in the pursuit of your teenager, like, what do you do and what do you think about, probably about some type of controlling her life or something that you wouldn't if you were in sound mind, right? And under the influence of it would be, when she's doing something or when you're doing something with her and you want to make it come out your way, because you're protecting her. So whatever you're working the steps on, just think about what you do and what you think that you would not do and think if you were in sound mind, and make your list. Next week, we're going to read those, a few of them too. We'll read them out. You don't have to read everything on there if you don't want to read something that's on there. But I want some examples of that next week so we can talk about that. Because it's a very powerful tool. You got a question?
Can you give another example or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Food, sex, any of those.
Food or sex? Okay, so food. So in the pursuit of food, and don't let the two columns confuse you. What we're looking for is what you do under the influence. And when I mean for food, it's under the influence of thinking about it, or in the pursuit of, or going to get some food, right? So, you're on the way to see a friend, and then you decide, oh, I need to stop and get a roast beef sandwich.
Writing hot checks for food. eating
Writing
food
hot
out
checks
of
for
trash
food, I would
can.
think is something that you wouldn't do in sound mind.
Under the influence of, I might throw up,
Yeah.
binge and purge.
Yeah.
Eat laxative.
There you go. Yeah, she's a foodie, so. Yeah, she worked the steps on food, which has to be, in my opinion, the hardest thing to work the steps on. Because everything else you work the steps on, it's about abstinence. You cannot have abstinence when it comes to food. So thank God I don't worry about that one.
You've recovered.
I've recovered from that, Vic. Thank you, Vic. I'm glad you noticed. So, and then, what'd you say, sex? Sex is, the first time I ever had sex, it was fantastic. It was probably like you, I was by myself. And I've been searching that feeling for the last 50-some years. But here's the thing, right? If there's always something the matter with us, like I don't feel. Some people feel less than. I've always suffered from feeling better than, because I was schooled that way and taught that way as a little kid. You're better than everybody. Act like you're better than everybody. And that's how I had to live my life. So, but they're both bad and wrong and not good and not healthy, right? So if I don't feel like normal or like you guys or whatever, then what am I going to do? I'm going to pretend. And what do I do when I pretend? I pretend it doesn't hurt. I pretend I'm not alone. I pretend I'm not feeling that. I pretend that people like me. I pretend that I'm okay, and so life is just one big act. Okay. And all of these things, I knew nothing about myself when I got sober. I was 32 years old, 33 or something like that. I knew nothing about myself. So I learned everything here in AA about who I am and what I am. And it's a great process because we get to become who we want to be. That's what we do in AA. We can become who we like to be. But in order to become who you want to be, you have to first know who you don't want to be. And that is the process of recovery. Understanding who you are and what you don't want no more out of that. I did some years in prison, way too many years in prison. And when I got sober, I could tell you without a doubt, I don't want to be a prisoner anymore. Not just a prisoner locked up behind bars. I don't want to be a prisoner to anything, a slave to anything, the drink, the drug, the woman, the whatever. And I had to free myself of all that stuff. But I had to first and foremost stop doing the things that wound me up in prison. So it's all a learning process. But that's what, if you sit down and think about it and you make your list, you'll come up with some things, but don't put down lying. So don't nobody put down lying, because in sound mind, you're still lying. And if you say no, you're a fucking liar. We all lie. You know, some of us to greater and lesser degrees, but we're all liars. You know. That's why when Bill wrote How It Works and he put down, you know, honesty, and 2 or 3 times in the first paragraph on how it works, he wasn't talking about not lying. He wasn't setting us up to fail. The honesty there is what happens to me when I take a drink. That's the honesty that Bill was looking for. What happens when I drink? Play it all the way through, Danny. Tell yourself the truth. Not don't lie. No. It's impossible not to lie. We get better at it the more we get, the more sober we are and the more spiritual we get. But there's still things that I'm not in reality with. You know, and those things come back and bite me in the ass. But that's life. So, all right. Anybody else got a question? We got a few minutes. Anybody got a question before we move on? We'll go over your answers next week. Maybe not all of you, but some of you, so you get a good understanding of how that really works, and then we'll start on step 2. But anybody got any questions? Any questions? Or anybody online got any questions? No? Going once, going twice?
I just want to say, I steal that line all the time.
Which line?
I get to figure out who I am by figuring out who I don't want to be.
That's right.
I heard it from 3 years ago.
And by the way, happy St. Patty's Day to all you Irish people. There you go. Tomorrow is St. Patty's. All right, that's it then. See you next week, same time,
Thanks,
same channel.
Danny.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you. Hiya, Johnny. How are you?